So with the 4.3 update comes a new feature that will recommend artifacts for your characters based on the community data. And the big question is, can you actually trust what's being shown here? Well, in this video, I will review many of the suggested builds and show you how things can get tricky when it comes to this new feature. Okay, so basically you can now click over here and check out top 3 recommended sets for any character, unless they just got released like in Navia's case. And what's really interesting is that it says here that the data is sourced from recently active players, which means these are the top 3 sets the majority of people are using with their characters. So let's see what the player base is doing with some of these character builds. And the first one that caught my eye was Child. The majority of people are using Heart of Death, which is fine. But what really shocked me was the absence of Nymph's Dream. Literally, a set that's made for him, and it doesn't even show up as a top 3 recommended set. Now, I personally have it, but I get it. The difference in terms of power level is pretty similar. Nymph's Dream offers the best damage increase for his burst, and if you speedrun the Abyss, it's an amazing set, but the 4 set from Heart of Death will catch up to Nymph if you go through more than one cycle or if the fight keeps going on. But at the end of the day, if this set was truly a good upgrade, I think people would have farmed for it. Like, you can see almost 1/3 official players have farmed up Golden Troop, and this set hasn't even been out for as long as compared to Nymphs. So I think when it comes to the recommended artifact sets for Child, they seem pretty accurate. Even the other mix of 2 sets seem fine when working towards the Heart of Death 4 set. But here's where I think this recommender becomes a bit weird. When looking at Thoma's sets, can you see what's wrong here? Yeah, there's no mention of Gilded Dreams or Flop set. I mean, really? He's literally one of the best enablers for Burgeon teams. Although I'm not saying that he's perfect, he definitely has energy issues he needs to solve. But I honestly thought people were using him for Burgeon teams. And the thing is, you can also check out recommended main stats for the actual artifacts. And I don't know about you, but I totally forgot this feature exists. But anyway, you can see when I cycle through the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, the pick rate for Elemental Mastery main stat hovers around 15%, which means there's actually a good chunk of people building him for Burgeon comps. But surprisingly enough, none of the Elemental Mastery artifact sets actually show up at the recommender. So I think this is the first case where you can see that trusting this feature blindly is not a good idea, especially since Thoma hasn't been the most popular unit in terms of Abyss usage or when it comes to showcases. And I think that's sad because he's super fun to use in Burgeon comps, and Dendro really elevated him. But yeah, it seems like the top 1 set is used by people who run him as a shield bot, while the second one is utilized for his off-field damage, and the last one is another shield Thoma, but he also boosts team attack with Noblesse set. I mean, all of this is fine, but again, the lack of Gilded Dreams or Flop set means you could be missing out on a whole new playstyle with him if you just go with what's recommended. Anyway, moving over, we can all agree that Yao Yao is good, right? And I mean, her top 3 sets all look solid. Obviously, the first place is taken by Deepwood with a massive 47% usage rate, and then there's Tenacity and Maiden's Beloved, both of which have their uses. However, there's no mention of Instructor's 4 set, which is an amazing set for Yao Yao to use in teams where she doesn't need to apply Deepwood effect. So mainly Nilo comps and Electro Quicken teams. Still, this is a pretty niche set to go for, and I get it. A lot of players just get rid of 4-star artifacts. I know I did when I tried to cobble together a useful Instructor's 4 set. But when it comes to niche sets, at least for Yao Yao, a great set like Instructors does not show up here. And to me, this means that there's a lot you might not know about a character if you just go with what's recommended here. And speaking of more niche use cases, there's zero mention of Archaic Petra for Noelle. The top 3 sets are just for DPS Noelle, and as much as I love playing her for just straight up damage, she did become quite good thanks to Farina, where you can enable triple or double Hydro comps with Archaic Petra. But sure, it's not a popular set, just straight up niche, and a pretty new playstyle as well. But if you never bothered building this maid you got from the beginner wishes, the good news is, you don't even need her C6 unlike her DPS build. All she needs to do is just act as a driver for mono Hydro comps, and pick up crystallized shards, heal the team, and enable the Archaic Petra boost. Now, another thing that surprised me was the unpopularity of Elemental Mastery Raiden. And the thing is, Gilded Dreams does show up as the second recommended set, but just look at the massive difference in usage. Almost 94% of players go with Emblem set, while literally just 1% instead go with Gilded Dreams. From the main stats, roughly 3% choose to use EM pieces, and it doesn't even show up on Circlet stats. I even mentioned this on Twitter, which by the way you can follow me there if you want to see some early thoughts before videos come out, but anyway, a lot of the people who replied to my post stated that after spending so much time farming up a good emblem set for Raiden, they didn't want to bother with an Elemental Mastery set, which I think is fair. Still, I expected way more people to use her in Hyperbloom teams, but I guess Cookie remains as the go-to Hyperbloom enabler, which as you can see here, the top 3 sets are all centered around Elemental Mastery, and that's how the player base chose to utilize her, which warms my heart quite honestly. I will never forget how lackluster Cookie felt before Dendro update, but yeah, at least in Raiden's case, there's a sweet spot when it comes to the recommender because you can see the most popular and also niche sets you can strive for. Now, I was also curious to see how everyone builds Hazo, and yeah, top 1 is Vivi set, other 2 are just a mix of attack and animal damage. But the truth is, if you really want to push for the best Hazo damage, Lava Walker and sometimes Thunder Soother can give him an edge compared to these top 3 sets. But honestly, I think it's fine they don't show up here because these 2 sets are super limiting in terms of team comps, and those who want to find out what is the best artifact set to boost Hazo's personal damage can just look up a guide online. So yeah, sometimes I think it's okay that this artifact recommender forgoes showing niche sets, since it could have easily squished the second and third set together, since both Shimenawa and Gladiators provide the same 2-piece bonus, and the developers could have showed us another third most popular set. But hey, maybe they will improve this in the future. Still, here's another thing I want to highlight. I mentioned earlier that as of making this video, Navia came out not that long ago. When you click on the button, you can see there's a message that says stats are still being tabulated, which is fine. And if you watched any of her guide videos, the new Echoing Woods set is best in slot for her. But do you know who else benefits a lot from this set? That's right, Ningguang. But it's not here. And look, I know it's stupid to assume that players will have already farmed up this set for our dear Ningguangus. However, it's important to keep in mind when a new artifact set comes out, it's not just this message that you need to be aware of, but also consider that the data has to update for older characters as well. But yeah, I've been pointing out a lot of things about this small but quite interesting feature that came with 4.3 update, and honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world. It definitely has its uses. From my own observations, if you're a new player or someone who doesn't want to bother looking up guides and just want to rely on these top 3 recommended sets, a good rule of thumb would be to aim for sets that have an abnormally high usage rate. This means they are pretty universal and can be used in many teams. Like, for example, Ayaka has 90% usage rate for Blizzard Strayer, same goes for Benny with Noblesse, and then there's Beidou, Xingqiu, and Xiangling, all have super high usage rate for Emblem set, and so on. All in all, for a lot of characters, the recommended sets I would say are pretty accurate, and since this data is based on the actual players who also need to be active, it can be a great way to understand how the community chooses to build their characters. But at the same time, the lack of context for these sets and lack of important niche options also means that you cannot fully rely on this new feature if you want to know what's the best way to build a character. Obviously, sets with an insanely high usage rate are pretty safe to go for, but for some characters like Toma or Noelle, this can be the difference between being played or not, especially if you consider their main playstyle to be not something that you care about. Still, I think it's pretty cool that the player base dictates what sets are popular, and I had a lot of fun checking this data out. Hopefully, Hoyo decides to do this both for weapons and teams as well, because I am very curious to see that data. But yeah, thanks for watching this video, and if you found it interesting, let me know if you want to see part 2 because I didn't go through all the characters, and let me tell you, there's still quite a few things that I left out when it comes to funny discoveries. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, make sure to press like on this video, and have a happy new year!